selecting refrigerants. This may seem like blasé, but it really is an area of continued change in the industry. So first, you select a refrigerant based on safety considerations, then performance, and then environmental impact. And all three of those are very, very important. So, does anybody die because of a refrigerant leak? Well, this is out of, what's the year up here? 2016? March of 2016, one died in an ammonia leak in a Boston seafood warehouse. Safety is critical. There's an article in 2013, about 15 people died in China after liquid ammonia leaks from refrigeration. Do we use ammonia anywhere on campus? No. Do we use ammonia anywhere in the city? Yes, a lot in industrial refrigeration, especially in the food business. So over in the main plants in the east side of town, there's a lot of industrial ammonia-based refrigeration for food. Okay. Before the modern chlorofluorocarbon refrigerants were used, ammonia was used much more heavily. It's still used heavily, but also methyl chloride for mechanical refrigeration. So in the 1920s, there was a big boom and expansion of refrigeration into keeping people comfortable. And when they did that, they had primarily methyl. This before the refrigerants were invented. This is what drove the chemists and the engineers to create the chlorofluorocarbon modern refrigerants. So you'd have a leak. The victim would not be able to smell it or perceive that they're being inundated with a deadly gas, and they become physically inert. They just want to lay around, and mentally fogged. They can't make better decisions for themselves. That's the pattern. The victims also began to feel hot, extremely hot. I hear that there's some drugs that some people will take, and then they'll rip off all their clothes and wander down streets because they feel hot. I don't know. But this is the same thing. They would find them dead and naked or half naked in their apartments. So they were developed in the 30s, very quickly actually, when there was a big demand for it. Because of the toxicity and flammability. There were some explosions and fires blamed on leaks of refrigerants, but primarily because of toxicity. And R12 was very, very popular. It was a CFC. That's an acronym for chlorofluorocarbon. And down here, I don't have a 12, I have a 22. And then the next HCFCs R22. So for many years, these were the two dominant refrigerants out there. If you had something in an automobile, in your car, you had an R12. You could go, when I was young, I could go into the supermarket and buy a can, 1 pound can of refrigerant 12. And I remember the neighbor complaining, they're ripping us off. They're charging us $1 per pound. You used to be able to get it for 30 cents a pound for a can. Now you can't touch it. And then in your homes, it was all R22, but the world changes now. If you buy a vehicle, what is in the vehicle for the last 10 years? 134A, which what are they doing is that it's a HFC. They've gotten out of the chlorine, the chlorofluorocarbon. So all the synthetic refrigerants used were either CFCs or HCFCs, sorry. In 1987, there was an international agreement that banned the production of chlorine-containing refrigerants. That was the Montreal Protocol. It's a big issue in refrigeration, had a big impact. So they had to develop a new class of chlorine-free refrigerants, and that's when they developed the hydrofluorocarbons, like 134A. So 22 is pretty well phased out, 12 is pretty well phased out, and 22 is being replaced by 410A. There's a lot of different refrigerants out there. Again, you just look at that chlorine, and that was the bad actor. So this is a little old, but you can see that there was a phasing out, a transitioning. It didn't happen just overnight, and different countries adopted it at different pace. So they were phased out for ozone depletion potential. When you hear the word ozone, you think of both ground level ozone not good to breathe, asthma, children, especially in the summer where you have a lot of automobiles, that brownish tinge and haze. But that's the ozone. It's ground level. That's not what we're talking about with refrigerants. We're talking about the stratospheric ozone. And what happens up there is you have the O3 and the sunlight comes and it gobbles up a lot of the harmful UV rays from the sun. But they were developing in the 80s and they found that they were getting holes in that stratospheric ozone layer, allowing bathing down at UV, not good. So, or higher intensity UV. So that's when they had the Montreal Protocol 87. But the other one of interest now, gaining interest, is global warming potential. Here's a plot. It's a little old, but it has a lot of refrigerants in it, CFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, etc. And this is good to bad for the ozone depleting potential, and good to bad for the global warming potential. So even though they switched to the hydrofluorocarbons, they still have some significant global warming potential. Hence, they're even getting more under attack. So environmental considerations are big news. And October 15th of 2016, hey, that's just a few days ago, isn't it? In the news again. Do you remember this article? How many people heard of it? Oh, nobody? You're too busy studying for your solids exam? Is that it? And MED, right? Well, anyway, the world keeps changing. It was a big deal in the national news, this New York Times article, Nations Fighting Powerful Refrigerant that warm the planet, reach a landmark deal. And this deal was signed by 170 countries. It happened in Rwanda. I guess that's a central meeting place for the world. If you want to get together with your colleagues from all other countries, you go to Rwanda. Where's that, right? Is that a part of Hawaii? Africa? So anyway, the 28th meeting of the parties of the Montreal Protocol, dealing with substances that deplete the ozone layer, but they had the next agreement, which was, they do a little review of ozone layer banning the ozone depleting coolants such as chlorofluorocarbons. But anyway, Friday night in Kigali, that's the city, they signed the big deal, and it's now called the Kigali Amendment. I wonder if that will be a name that will be kicked around for many years to come. I'm not certain. But they're going to phase out the HFCs, which were developed to replace the CFCs. Yeah. So, anyway, it's interesting that this is going to happen more early in the U.S. and EU, and then later in China and Brazil, and in Africa, and then even later for India, Pakistan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait. So it's phased in throughout the world.